Welcome to the BEASTwriter podcast. I am your host, Ryan Sakamoto, and today we're going to be discussing why I believe Andre Carter and Jeff Ulbrich could follow Dan Quinn to the San Francisco 49ers. So let's get started. For those who don't know, if you're new to following my podcast, I like to break up my podcast into three different parameters. The first one is who are the players and coaches involved. The second is why the move was made or could be made, and the last but not least, third parameter is the instant gratification versus long-term gains. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about, in this case, the coaches. Who are the coaches involved? Well, I just said Andre Carter and Jeff Ulbrich. Before I go into it, both are under contract with their respective teams, Andre Carter with the New York Jets and Jeff Ulbrich with the Atlanta Falcons. But why would I tie him in with Dan Quinn, who's also a unrestricted free agent as a coach? I'm going to break that down later in this podcast. So let's go ahead and talk about those positional coaches, Jeff Ulbrich and Andre Carter. All right. First, let's start with Andre Carter. He was a 2001 first-round pick, drafted number 7 overall by the great Bill Walsh. He then played for the 49ers from 2001 to 2005 before moving on to Washington from 2006 to 2010, I believe. 2006, 2010? Yeah. And then finishing his career with the New England Patriots and the Oakland Raiders. In all, a 13-year NFL career that resulted in 80.5 career sacks. Not a bad career from Andre Carter. So, after his playing days were over, he then interned with the San Francisco 49ers back in 2016 under Chip Kelly, working specifically with the pass rushers at the 3-4 base outside linebacker position that Chip Kelly utilized, and worked with the likes of Ahmad Brooks, worked with the likes of Aaron Lynch, worked with the likes of Ronald Blair, and really worked on their pass rush moves, hand placement, hand fighting, how to use violent hands, how to leverage your technique in a positive way where you're putting the offensive tackles in a compromised position. The list goes on and on of things that he worked with these outside linebackers during his short tenure with the team. All right, he then moved on to the Miami Dolphins and was the assistant defensive line coach from 2017 to 2018 before moving on, but staying in the AFC East with the New York Jets under Adam Gase's coaching staff and stemming from 2019, to 2020 or present day. All right, so why am I bringing Andre Carter up randomly? Well, he's a great positional coach, number one. Two, he's going to be unemployed at the end of the year because Adam Gase, I believe, is fired. I think he's already gone. There's no way you can send 8 men. Oh my gosh. There's no way you can send an all-out blitz, leaving your cornerbacks island against Henry Ruggs on the last play to lose the game. Great win by the Jets yesterday to beat the LA Rams, but let's not mistake it, man. Greg Williams' play call was horrible, and although he's the one that made the play call, it's ultimately the head coach's responsibility in the headphone when he hears that play call to call a timeout and go to Greg Williams and be, hey, look, what are you doing, bro? We are not calling that. This is not Pee Wee football. This is the NFL, which stands for not for long. So, by you calling that play call, you're fired. No, that didn't happen. He allowed them to call that play, and ultimately, Adam Gase shoulders responsibility, because he's the head coach. He's the one that's supposed to be making those calls in crucial situations, and he didn't. So I think Adam Gase is gone. See ya. A lot of coaches are on the chopping block, right? Or already been fired. Let's go down the list on that. Going off topic a little bit, but let's talk about all 32 NFL teams, as I like to do. Yeah, the Atlanta Falcons got rid of GM Thomas Dimitroff and head coach Dan Quinn. You have the Jacksonville Jaguars, who just got rid of GM Dave Caldwell. In comes Vice President of Player Personnel Trent Baalke, who was signed on earlier this year. You don't think that discussion took place that, hey, we might get rid of Dave Caldwell and you're now going to be the new interim GM if that happens, and permanently going to be the new GM moving forward for the 2021 season and foreseeable future? I guarantee those talks took place before GM Trent Baalke took the job. So he's going to be the GM of the Jacksonville Jaguars moving forward. Why would you be the Vice President of Player Personnel? The only guy in front of you is the GM. He just got relieved of his duties, and then you're acting interim GM only to go revert back to your Vice President of Player Personnel duties at the end of the year because a new GM is going to come in? No. That's not GM Trent Baalke's MO. He's going to be the GM, number one, and he's going to be the man in charge in Jacksonville. But that's for a later discussion. If you check my Twitter receipts, you would know that I said it, I called it out from day one. But that, again, that's for another discussion, another podcast. Then you have the Lions got rid of GM Bob Quinn and head coach Matt Patricia. They're out. They're looking for a new regime moving forward. That's where Robert Saleh is rumored to be headed to. Then you have the Houston Texans, who had acting GM head coach Bill O'Brien. He's axed. He's gone at the end of the year. Or he's not gone at the end of the year. He's been gone. So they'll be looking for a new head coach GM at the end of the year. And then you have Panthers GM Marty Herney, who was just relieved of his duties this morning. So, a lot going on. But let's talk about the San Francisco 49ers specifically. And specifically, Andre Carter and Jeff Ulbrich. Getting back to Andre Carter, right? Just talked a little about his playing career. Now I talked a little about his coaching career. But he's going to be unemployed at the end of the year because, like I said, head coach and their coaching staff go hand in hand. If the head coach is gone, the coaching staff is collateral damage. The new head coach is going to want to bring in his own guys anyways. That's just how it is. That's just how the NFL works, okay? And in any business, that's usually how it works. It's not what you know, it's who you know a lot of times. You know, narcissism, call it nepotism, but it happens in the NFL. Is it fair? Absolutely not, but it happens, all right? Which begs me the question with Robert Saleh, right? Robert Saleh is all but gone in San Francisco. He's going to be promoted to a head coach if it's not the Detroit Lions, somewhere else. So who's going to take the defensive corner position? If you watch an earlier podcast below, which I included in the description below, I believe that guy is going to be Dan Quinn, and he's going to want his own guys coming in to the DC position. And although he can only probably bring in a certain number of coaches because under the rules you can't bring over other coaches who are currently under contract to be in a position with another team unless he gets the okay from that team that he's currently on. There's certain players or certain coaches, I should say, that probably be on the outside looking in anyways. I mean, Andre Carter is going to be unemployed. Jeff Ulbrich will likely be unemployed if Raheem Morris doesn't get the head coaching title with the Atlanta Falcons, so he's going to be on the outside looking in. Jeff Ulbrich and Andre Carter both worked with Dan Quinn as players back in San Francisco. Dan Quinn brought over Jeff Ulbrich to be his linebackers coach from 2015 to present day, and then he also worked with defensive line coach Andre Carter during his playing days. So the familiarity of having those former players around you, or around him, I should say, would be a match made in heaven. Now, people can say, well, they have Coach K, right? 49ers already have Coach Kosar. He's done an excellent job, right, as a defensive line coach. But what if Robert Saleh decides not to become the defensive coordinator as well as acting head coach? Because that's too much responsibility to bear. He's going to want a DC. What if Coach Kosaric, or he brings over DeMeco Ryans to be a defensive coordinator over with him to the Detroit Lions? Then you have other positions that need to be fulfilled. So Dan Quinn will probably be sitting with Kyle Shanahan and say, hey, man, thank you for bringing me on. I would love the opportunity to coach the San Francisco 49ers defense. Thank you for returning the favor. I brought you on as my OC with the Atlanta Falcons. We did good things, went to the Super Bowl. I think we can accomplish that here in San Francisco. However, I want to bring in my own linebacker coach. I want to bring on my own defensive line coach. What if those guys, Andre Carter and Jeff Ulbrich, who I just mentioned, because he has, again, rapport with them, what if Kyle Shanahan says no? He's like, no, man, we're keeping DeMeco Ryans. We're keeping Coach K. They're not going anywhere. Dan Quinn could be like, okay, well, I'm just going to go to Seattle Seahawks then. Because obviously Ken Norton not getting done. So Dan Quinn goes back to the the Seattle Seahawks, which then puts the San Francisco 49ers in a tough position because who's going to be the new defensive coordinator? Are you going to promote DeMeco Ryans to be the defensive coordinator if Dan Quinn leaves? I mean, this is for another discussion, but this all plays a role in the game of musical chairs in the NFL. So getting back to Robert Saleh, if he moves on to the Detroit Lions, brings Coach K to be his defensive coordinator, or DeMeco Ryans to be his defensive coordinator position, other positional units open up by default. And with that, that's why I said Dan Quinn could be coming to San Francisco while bringing 3 former 49ers players. You can watch or listen to that in the earlier podcast, and I've posted that in the description below. So go ahead and be sure to watch that podcast that tie into this podcast so you can kind of see my real-time thinking on what's going on and my thoughts around the NFL. All right? But getting back to Andre Carter, Coaches, players go hand in hand, right? Coaches and players go hand in hand. Usually where a coach goes, a player follows, which, again, if you follow me on Twitter, Kerry Hyder Jr. is a free agent at the end of the year. The 49ers cannot afford Kerry Hyder Jr. If Robert Saleh becomes the Detroit Lions head coach, I can be sure that Kerry Hyder Jr. will join Robert Saleh in Detroit. Just saying it. Just calling it. Check the Twitter receipt. All right. So they go hand in hand. Same thing with former coaches or former players who become coaches. Andre Carter, Jeff Ulbrich. Jeff Ulbrich played under Dan Quinn in San Francisco and later became what? His linebackers coach at the Atlanta Falcons years later. Same thing happens. You see the same trends happening in the NFL. That's just the way it goes. All right. Getting back to Andre Carter. Dan Quinn coached Carter during his San Francisco playing days from 2003 to 2004, and Carter was as coachable as they come. I spoke with many former players and many former coaches who coached Andre Carter and said that he was as coachable as they come. In fact, many believe he could have been a double-digit sack artist year in and year out. However, because of the scheme that he was playing under and because of the assignments that he was asked to do on a consistent basis, he was not allowed to simply rush the passer 24/7 and not given that luxury. However, he did have the skill set, which is why the 49ers GM at the time, former head coach, great Bill Walsh, drafted him out of Berkeley. All right? And I believe they traded up for Andre Carter, number 7 overall, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe they didn't. I think they did, but I'm not mistaken. I gotta go back. Anyways, Andre Carter was a hell of a player during his playing days, all right? So let's talk about that, right? The coach-player relationship. Carter was as coachable as they come. He even worked, despite unconventional wisdom, with the great George Chung, who was a mixed martial artist. He worked with the San Francisco 49ers and hand placement, how to leverage your technique, how to display violent hands, the list goes on and on. Understanding how to read your keys and understanding how to use the offensive tackle's momentum against you. These are things that Andre Carter was seen working on day in and day out. In fact, when I was in high school back in 2001, a long time ago, me and my dad would watch every San Francisco 49ers game together, as we did throughout the years growing up. My family, for those who don't know, had front row season tickets on the 20-yard line, on the 49ers sideline, and lower box, section 14, row A, front row. So before every home game, me and my dad that'll be our ritual. We go to the San Francisco 49ers game, wake up at the crack of dawn, get there really early, talk game plan as if we were the coaches, what we think might happen, then go into the stadium. We wouldn't tailgate because obviously I'm in high school. I'm not really drinking at that time. Either my dad's not a big drinker anyways. So we would go in and just watch the players warm up. And who would we see? Routinely, 2 players. Andre Carter on defense, Terrell Owens on offense. Along with the special teams, the field goal kicker, the placeholder, you had Andy Lee and you had Brian Jennings. Those guys were there. But aside from those guys, it was just those 2 guys. If you want to talk about 2 players that stood out in my mind, 4 hours before kickoff, you see Andre Carter on the field doing stretches, working on hand placement with George Chung, who he called the Bruce Lee of the NFL. So, again, as coachable as they come, Andre Carter connects the dots with the Dan Quinn, who coached him, because he did what was asked of him. If Andre Carter was asked to play a read and react defense to set the edge, he would do that. And at the expense of getting sack numbers. And in today's NFL, you see players just give up outside containment, rush integrity, game in and game out. And when they do that, they're leaving their linebackers out to dry. Well, Andre Carter was never one to do that. He was always as coachable as they come. And it stems from his dad, who was a great NFL player during his days. And so his bloodlines run deep. He's a legacy. All right? So what I'm talking about, the hand placement, it's called the art of war. And George Chung was very attention to detail oriented. And you can see that Andre Carter worked with him numerous occasions. And he took what he learned from George Chung and applied it to the NFL in his coaching days moving forward. There's Twitter videos that I posted up of Andre Carter working with hand placement with Ahmad Brooks, Aaron Lynch, the likes of the pass rushers, Ronald Blair even, and flipping the hips, how to use leverage to their advantage, and how to use offensive tackles leverage against them with hand placement, hand fighting techniques, all right? Andre Carter does so many different things. When I was watching him under head coach Chip Kelly at the time, he would tell his players to play fast. I don't care what you do, just play fast and trust what you see. Trust your eyes, trust what you see. He allows them to play fast, lets the players play because he played the game, and that's a player's dream as a coach. Coming from a coach, you never want to read and react. If you read and react, you're thinking too much and you're not really playing the game. You're not really having fun. You're just reading what the defense is doing and then reacting to what the defense is doing, or reacting what the offense is doing. Yes, you have to do those things, but if you can play fast and not think as much, everything comes naturally, and now you're allowing your God-given ability to take over. That's how coaches should be coaching up their players. It goes back to, and I can't believe people are saying this, that Rex Ryan should be the defensive coordinator. Well, Rex Ryan runs a 3-4 base defense, and the 49ers defense and the personnel is dictated for a 4-3 defense. So why would you switch up to a 3-4 base defense? We already seen that they don't have the personnel to do it under Chip Kelly. You can't think that Eric Armstead can honestly be a Justin Smith in a 3-4 defense. It just doesn't work. He's just not that guy. You can't expect Javon Kinlaw to hold the point of attack consistently enough to be the nose tackle or nose guard or even the 3-4 defensive end for technique. You just can't ask him to do that. That's not his game. So these players are not scheme universal, as is DeForest Buckner. He's the only exception under Chip Kelly's staff on the defensive line that I saw that can make that transition, along with Ronald Blair. But again, this team is dictated to a 4-3 defense. So anyone who says that Rex Ryan should be the defensive coordinator of the San Francisco 49ers, no, that's just a bad move. Because if you play and transition to a 3-4 base defense, who's going to be your edge rushers at the outside linebacker position? Right? Who is it? Name it. Okay, so you're going to have to develop some player to kind of be that guy. And I don't see that happening. I think this team is geared toward a 4-3 base defense, which is why you bring Dan Quinn in, because he's bringing the Seattle Seahawks cover 1, cover 3 scheme with no drop off in scheme. And all is forgotten. You just go with what you have. Out comes Saleh, in comes Quinn. All is forgotten, and we move forward. All right. So, getting back to Andre Carter, in my opinion, he's one of the best defensive line coaches in the NFL. He's going to be unemployed at the end of the year because Adam Gase, I see being fired, and the 49ers should pick him up. And I know the 49ers fans are saying, oh, we have Coach Kosrick. Again, Coach K, what if he moves on with Saleh to the Detroit Lions and becomes their DC? Or, if not him, DeMeco Ryans. You can always use a guy like Andre Carter. And he's going to get picked up by someone. I mean, you look at the coaching staffs around the NFL who are in turmoil right now, right? Quote unquote in shambles. You have the Atlanta Falcons, Jacksonville Jaguars, Detroit Lions, Houston Texans, Carolina Panthers. One of those teams is going to pick up Andre Carter. You'd be dumb not to. So I'm just eager to see where he's going to go, but I want him to be in San Francisco because I believe that he'd be a good fit for what the 49ers are trying to do there. And he has familiarity with and rapport with Dan Quinn, who he played under, and then has some kind of, how do I say this? He knows, he understands the game at a level that not many former players understand, and that's attention to detail, and that's gaining the respect of the players because he played the game at the highest level. 13-year NFL career, 80.5 career sacks. Guy was a beast and a monster on and off the field. And I think he'd be a great addition to the coaching staff. All right, but enough about him. Let's talk about Jeff Ulbrich. Right, getting to my next topic, Jeff Ulbrich. Jeff Ulbrich was a 2000 third-round pick, drafted number 86 overall by the San Francisco 49ers. Played for them from 2003 to 2009. That was one of the best drafts ever, 2000 NFL draft. Oh my gosh. I believe that's when they... I remember making a sign that said, all we want for Christmas is Courtney Brown. Boy, was I wrong. So wrong on so many different levels. I should have said LeVar Arrington, but I said Courtney Brown. He actually went to the Cleveland Browns, and the 49ers traded down and got Julian Peterson at number 16, I believe. And they also landed Ahmed Plummer, I believe, at number 24. If I'm getting these right, man, I'm pretty damn good. But yeah, they traded down with the Cleveland Browns, picked up 2 first-round picks in return, got Julian Peterson, who's one of my all-time favorite players, man, he could play any position on the field. You're talking about strong safety, free safety, boundary cornerback, slot cornerback, outside linebacker, inside linebacker, defensive line, you name it. He was scheme universal as they come. And I remember every time he missed an interception or got his hand on the ball, he would do push-ups. That was always fun to watch. But yeah, Julian Peterson, man, one of my favorite players, one of the most underrated 49er players in my estimation. He could have had a Hall of Fame career, and ultimately injuries derailed his career. But yeah, great player, Julian Peterson. Great pickup out of Michigan State. They then rolled with Ahmed Plemer, who's one of the sound, savvy boundary cornerbacks coming out of the draft. Most fundamentally sound, I would say, in my opinion, coming out of the Ohio State University. And in the second round, they also got the likes of Jason Webster, I believe, from Texas A&M, and John Engelberger from Virginia Tech. Wow, if I'm getting these right, I'm hitting. I believe they also got John Milam. I think John Milam played at some I forgot what school John Milam played for. But then they also got a guy by the name of John Keith, who was a strong safety. He came out of Furman in the later rounds. You also got a guy by the name of, I believe Brian Jennings came out of that class. I think Brian Jennings came out of that class too. Brian Jennings, they also got Tim Rattay, I believe, at Louisiana Tech. They missed on Tom Brady, obviously. They picked up Giovanni Carmazzi out of Hofstra. So, yeah, if I'm getting these right, I'm surprising myself because that's how back I'm going. But yeah, you can kind of tell that's when I started covering the draft, back in high school. My first year was actually 1998 was my first year. Or no, excuse me, 1999 was my first year of covering the NFL draft. Just as a fan, as a kid that wanted to learn the NFL game, and did pretty well since then. So here I sit today. But yeah, man, that was one hell of a draft. Picked up a lot of great players in that draft. But yeah, Jeff Ulbrich, great player, great special teams standout. A little background, Jeff Ulbrich, again, he played for the 49ers from 2003 to 2009. Sounds a California native. He then went to Live Oak High School in Morgan Hill before moving on to Gavilan Community College. Played there for a little bit before becoming a 2-year starter at Hawaii and then being drafted by the San Francisco 49ers. After his playing days were over, he then became a Seattle Seahawks special teams assistant under Pete Carroll from 2010 to 2011 before moving down to the college ranks, coaching the UCLA linebackers and special teams from 2012 to 2014 before moving back into the NFL under Dan Quinn with the Atlanta Falcons to become their linebackers coach from 2015 to present day. Now, Jeff Ulbrich is currently serving as the interim defensive coordinator position because Raheem Morris was the interim head coach. But if Raheem Morris doesn't get the job, again, Jeff Ulbrich is considered collateral damage because head coach and the coaching staff go hand in hand and they will be wiped clean, which means new regime, new GM, not new ownership, but new GM, new head coach, new coaching staff come into play. All right. Woo! Ulbrich could be Quinn's pick for linebackers coach, and I know we talked about D'Amico Ryans, but D'Amico Ryans is a great linebackers coach. In fact, I believe he's in line for defense coordinator position. Matt Maiocco even pointed that out in an earlier article. You should go ahead and read that, and I agree with him. D'Amico Ryans at some point will become a defensive coordinator. He was a smart, savvy football player, just like Jeff Ulbrich. But what if Dan Quinn wants his guy? What if Dan Quinn says, "Hey, man, I want my guy"? It's up to Kyle Shanahan to kind of fire D'Amico Ryans if Dan Quinn is so adamant on bringing Jeff Ulbrich with him back to San Francisco. Will it happen? I don't know. But these discussions are going to take place, and Dan Quinn's going to want some guys to be coaching his players and the techniques that they're coaching up. Dan Quinn knows what Andre Carter and Jeff Ulbrich bring to the table as players. And he also knows what they bring to the table as coaches. So they kind of go hand in hand. Now, it's up to Kyle Shanahan to be like, you know what? We're not doing that, man. We know you want Jeff Ulbrich, but we already have D'Amico Ryans, and we're not letting them go. So, if those conversations take place, and Dan Quinn says, okay, well, I'm just going to go back to Seattle, and I'm going to bring Jeff Ulbrich and Andre Carter with me to Seattle, then who's going to become the defense coordinator position? That guy is going to be Kris Richard. That's right, Kris Richard, the defensive back coach of the Dallas Cowboys before being fired as collateral damage of Jason Garrett's coaching staff last year. Everyone thought that he would be coming to San Francisco, be a perfect fit. I even said that he would be a perfect fit for San Francisco to coach the DBs once Woods left to become the DC of the Cleveland Browns. However, that didn't happen. And the reason for that is what I'm hearing is Kris Richard knows his worth. He doesn't want to become another positional coach that runs the game as if he's the defensive coordinator. Because, let's face it, Kris Richard is a great defensive coordinator. I don't think you should be accepting anything less than the quarterback position if I'm Kris Richard, because I know my worth. And I think Kris Richard knows his worth. I think there were like 5 or 6, probably 7, 8 teams that were interested in Kris Richard being the secondary coach this year, but he turned them all down. I believe San Francisco 49ers were one of them. But he said, hey, look, man, thanks, but no thanks, man. I know my worth. I firmly believe I'm going to be a defensive coordinator position in the NFL, and that's my status, and that's my value, or what I believe my value to be. So thanks, but no thanks. I'm just going to hold out until the right opportunity comes my way. Well, that opportunity couldn't come your way sooner than later, Kris Richard, because if Dan Quinn goes and bolts to the Seattle Seahawks in what's called a bidding war with the San Francisco 49ers and Seattle Seahawks, look for Kris Richard to come in and take that spot with no drop-off in scheme, because, again, it all stems from the Gus Bradley scheme. You have Gus Bradley, you have Robert Saleh, you have Dan Quinn, right? And then you have Kris Richard. So you have all these guys who come to the Seattle Seahawks coaching tree with no drop-off in production, which is why they make sense, the most sense. And if it's not Kris Richard, it's going to be Dan Quinn. If it's not Dan Quinn, it's going to be Kris Richard. Mark it down. Again, I don't see Rex Ryan coming to San Francisco. If they do, it's going to be a huge mistake because he runs a 34 base defense. Now, if he was becoming the defensive coordinator position of a team like that runs a 34 base defense, like the Baltimore Ravens, Pittsburgh Steelers, a team like that, then yeah, it would make sense. But they don't. They run a 4-3 base defense, cover 1, cover 3 scheme, keep everything in front. Boundary cornerbacks play 5 to 6 yard cushion. Slot cornerbacks keeps everything in front. The linebackers play their curl flat route respectively. Fred Warner takes away the deep seams depending on who the tight end is. And that's the name of the game. Safeties play the eraser role. Jimmy Ward does a really good job at that. So basically what you're looking for is a guy who can come in with no drop off in scheme. And I believe that guy would be Kris Richard or Dan Quinn. All right. So no matter what happens with Andre Carter or Jeff Ulbrich, they will surely get picked up by some NFL team because their talent as positional coach is too good to pass up. And if Dan Quinn, again, goes to the Seattle Seahawks in a bidding war, look for Kris Richard to be coming as the new DC. That's it for today, but I'm going to answer some questions as well because I've been off the BEASTwriter podcast for a while because I've been on my prep. Holidays are here, family's in town, so let's get to your questions, all right? So 49bud52 from Twitter says, okay, position need in order. Well, obviously it starts with the quarterback. If you don't have a talented mobile quarterback, you're all but gone. All but gone and mean you're not going to be relevant in the NFL. So in today's NFL, I'm looking at a guy like Zach Wilson. I included that in an earlier podcast, I believe it was like a month ago. So go ahead. I included it in the description below. You can tie in that podcast to this podcast and answer in your question and why I believe a guy like Zach Wilson could be a solid option for the San Francisco 49ers, depending on their draft position. That's first and foremost. Secondly, you still want to stay on the offense side of the football and address the offensive line. You cannot put your quarterback in a compromised position if he doesn't have enough time to make his reads, if he doesn't have enough time to go through his progressions, if he doesn't have enough time to evaluate the down and distance as the play develops. And everything starts up front. Without a solid running game, you're letting your quarterback out to dry because now defenses can pin their ears back and just attack the quarterback because they know they can't beat you deep because you don't have enough time to throw the football because you have no offensive line in front of you to hold and sustain their leverage. Yes, which brings me to right tackle Mike McGlinchey. Yes, people are hitting him with body analysis and say he has to gain 15 to 20 pounds, but I hate when people put numbers like that because, again, if you guys don't know what I do, part of my 9 to 5 or part of my job is I'm a bodybuilder. I'm actually competing for my FB Pro card right now on the national stage. And with that being said, when you're hit with body analysis, as GMs would like to call it, or in this case, GM Trent Baalke and me would talk about this extensively about body analysis, you really want to talk about weight in terms of not just putting on mass, but putting on size, but where that size is coming from, right? So when someone says, oh, Mike McGlinchey needs to put on 15 to 20 pounds, or Ronald Blair needs to drop 25, 30 pounds, or Aaron Lynch needs to drop 15, 16 pounds, right? Or Joe Looney needs to drop from 315 to 305. When you hear these numbers, it's really a game of what are you talking about, bro? Because I know what I'm talking about. You can't just put out a random number like that. You have to actually do the legwork on it. Each physique is made up differently. So if you're talking about putting on mass as an offensive tackle, let's say right tackle Mike McGlinchey, you want to say, okay, you want to put on some mass, some size, but don't put a number on the actual scale because muscle weighs more than fat. And if you want to break it down even further than that and peel back layers of the onion and get to the core, how much body fat percentage are we talking about? Where's that body fat percentage going to be coming from? Is it more in the arms? Is it going to be in the lower half? Is it in the trunk, or is it in the upper strength area? So you want to make sure that when you're trying to build muscle mass and you're talking about a person's size or a person's strength or a person's dietitian program or nutrition program, you really want to make sure that you know what you're talking about. So Mike McGlinchey, people say he needs to add on weight. Okay, so again, where's that weight coming from? Is it the trunk? Is it the glutes? Is it the hamstrings? Is it the calves? Where is it coming from? Is it the quads? Is it flexibility? Is it muscular endurance training? What exactly are we talking about? Or is it the upper strength that we're talking about? Is it learning how to leverage? Okay, so we have to work on bench press because you have to build up a fuller chest. You have to build up a higher upper chest. So we're going to do more incline work. Or we have to do more pec flies. Or we have to do work on your delts and your rear delts and then your caps. And then we have to work on your shoulders. And then we have to work on your biceps and your triceps. Where is this mass coming from? You can't just put a number on it because, hey, if someone said, hey, Ryan, you need to put on 15 pounds. If my coach said, you need to put on 15 pounds, I'm going to be like, okay, so what do I need to work on to put on? What do you want that? What do you want that to be? Like, I'm already at 5% body fat, so what do you want me to build on? Oh, I want you to work on your caps. Okay, so then I'd be like, okay, I need to work on my calves. Why? Because you need to have functional strength to move players at the point of attack. Okay, makes sense. So I'm going to do a lot of push-pull movements, right? So I'm going to do a lot of push movements. So I'm going to find out football movements and then tailor my workouts accordingly to what the scheme asks of me in certain situations. That's how you build up mass, not just throwing out a random number, 15, 25 pounds, or blaming it on a specific diet because a guy goes vegan or doesn't go vegan, or what he's eating and not eating. Because let's face it, you want to talk about diet? Let's talk about vegan diets. How many vegan players out there are successful? I can name 3 of them off the top of my head. You guys do the research, but I can name 3 of them off the top of my head who are getting it done, actually having career years that have gone vegan. And then I have players who strictly believe in eating red meat or eating a high protein diet, low fat diet, or going the caveman diet, eating all red meat and veggies with little to no carbs. Or you can do the keto diet. I mean, there's so many different diets that you can work on. The problem is that you can Google anything in today's society, but at the age of information, you want to know what works for your body, right? So if you guys follow me on Instagram over the years, you guys know what? I eat pizza, burgers, fries, chili dogs, donuts, Twix, Kit Kat, Rice Krispie treats with almond butter, and I look like this. How is that possible? Well, 1, my workouts are different. 2, I do my macronutrient count, so my proteins, fats, and carbohydrates are different from the average person at my weight. So you have to really know what works for your body, and what works for me may not work for you. It's the same thing with Mike McGlinchey. If you're working with Mike McGlinchey one-on-one, you can't just be like, okay, well, this guy's, 6'7", 315 pounds. Okay, cool. So how are we going to formulate a diet according to his gains? Right? What's his gains? Oh, well, he should be eating brown rice instead of white rice. Well, no, not true, because white rice and brown rice, there's a huge... Again, I can do a whole podcast on this, on why diet plays a role. Because brown rice and white rice, there's not very much nutritional value other than dietary fiber. And if you're an athlete, you're going to want to eat white rice instead of brown rice. I'll get to that later. All right, well, that'll be it for today. I hope you liked what I had to offer. If you did, please hit the subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. There's also a thumbs up that you can subscribe there. Also, hit the like button so you can see all the engagements that I have in terms of, and interact with me too. Drop a comment on what you liked, what you didn't like. Ask me any questions in there, and I'll be sure to answer those questions. Speaking of questions, I have one by Jerry Perez. He says, Ryan, what do you think they need to do at the quarterback position for next season? I went ahead and answered that, and I included that in this podcast, so go ahead and watch that. Jerry, thank you for your question. Another question here. Wow, the questions are coming in here. What is the question on? Oh, what do you think of... Wait, what does it say? Bear with me for a second. Oh, what do you think of Richard Sherman next year? Well, he's all about gone. I said that in another podcast. I said that before the year even started that he should have been gone this year before the season even started. Get rid of $12.9 million, wipe their hand cleans there. They could have re-signed DeForest Buckner. Anyways, that's it for today. Hit the subscribe button in the lower right hand corner of the screen as I keep all things Beast. Thank you for tuning in. BEASTwriter, out.